name is Calvin Gladney. My company is called Mosaic Urban Partners, actually. And I have the honor and privilege of leading the discussion with this expert panel. And I would say in the realm of ULI, since they love global discussions, I've put my Twitter and Instagram handle up there at Mosaic Urban. So let's let the world know of this discussion today. Um, and so our panel, and part of what I'm going to do is a couple introductory remarks, simply to kind of bridge the stories and the discussions from the awesome mayor's panel and the J.C. Nichols panel earlier today. Anybody like that panel? What do you think? I thought they were awesome. I mean, just spectacular. And so, we want to tie those discussions and those issues to this idea of connected citizens and how do we leverage technology to make change and particularly be a part of the urban revitalization that we all want and that we see here in Kansas City. So I've decided in my rogue way, you teed this up, to call this little introductory remarks, Gurus, Game Changers, and Gloria Parkers. So we're going to talk about this. Work with me here. So let's see. So there were lots of themes that you heard over the course of the day here. And so we don't need to go into them, but they all revolved around how do we deal with these challenges and seize these opportunities when it comes to what we're calling, and Patrick defined at the very beginning, 18-hour or mid-tier cities. Like, how do we deal with these issues? And, as a kind of real estate industry, we're a pretty kind of cocky group of folks. And we always feel like we're on the vanguard of things and we're on the front end of everything, including technology. So, like real estate folks, when we're talking to ourselves, our echo chamber says, we're like cutting edge like the Apple Watch, right? We're like Apple Watch 2.0. But when you really think about whether we're leveraging technology in the way we should in terms of urban revitalization, we're more like this guy. We're just not doing a good job. We're walking around like we're doing something, but our technology is outdated and our usage of it is outdated. And one of the reasons I think it's outdated and we're not using it the way we should is we have an over-reliance on gurus, game changers, and Gloria Parkers. Gurus, game changers, and Gloria Parkers. So let's quickly talk about that. Gurus. That's probably an unfair picture of gurus. So let's do another picture. Anybody recognize these two gurus? Name Robert Moses and Jane Jacobs, who now there's a Broadway play where they actually fight. But we have this reliance on gurus. They come up with this overarching theory of philosophy that solves all problems, and then we fly them in, and they do their magic, and then we say, we're going to do what the guru said. And what we should be doing is not fully relying on them, but also thinking about data, information. What's the basis of their theory? Does it really work, and can we graft their guru logic into our city? So over-reliance on gurus, I think, is hurting some of our use of technology in the way we should. Game changers. And I think one of the mayors used the term silver bullets. Same concept. We see these things like, anybody here been to the New York City High Line? It's pretty awesome. And everyone's like, I want to get one of those in my city. Or, hey, let's have an innovation district because there's a guru out there talking about that. And there's a million examples. And even like, we should get a streetcar. I was a little worried. I will make sure I know where the exit is when I mention this point. But see, the point is over-reliance, you see, because in Kansas City, 835,878 people in the first 5 months of the Kansas City streetcar rode the Kansas City streetcar. So that's not over-reliance on the game changer. That's making good decisions, good decision-making, but thinking about what the gurus are talking about and thinking about this game changer and using it correctly. That's what you see here, not in that picture, but that's what you see here in Kansas City when it comes to streetcar. Finally, what I'm calling Gloria Parkers. And there was a discussion earlier about Johns Hopkins and East Baltimore. I actually was on that project. So this is actually a picture of a stakeholder in a meeting that I ran in East Baltimore. And so, Gloria Parker could look like her. She could look like her. But see, Gloria Parker is just illustrative. It's just a concept. It's not specific to gender. So Gloria Parker could be kind of anybody. The point is these Gloria Parkers, and you know them, right? They come to every community meeting. They're the first one in line at the public hearing. And all of our thoughts, all of our thinking, all of the voices, all of the decisions, and the investments in the neighborhoods relate to what Gloria Parker said. And so, and our panel will talk a little bit about how we can use technology to get a diversity of voices. And if we get that diversity of voices, we can then get to some of those equitable outcomes that we're talking about. Because if you're listening to the same voices with the same opinions and the same perspectives, then it's inevitable that you get outcomes that are not equitable because you never had an equitable set of perspectives. So, just in a nutshell, gurus, game changers, and Gloria Parkers. You know, Gloria Parkers are some of my best friends, right? There's nothing wrong with gurus, there's nothing wrong with game changers, and there's nothing wrong with Gloria Parkers. What's wrong is if we rely too heavily on them and think we're on the cutting edge of technology like Apple Watch when we're really still acting like this guy. So thanks. And now I hand it over to, to Peter Calthorpe.
Well, I got to say that's I think a completely right on target summary of where we are. And I've concluded that there are great ideas out there and there are game changers. I think transit's the game changer. But it's the community process that matters, and it's really about coalition building. So over the years, we evolved a technique using a lot of data to actually allow communities to build their own scenarios, their own visions of their community, and then test them, get the real hard data, the results. What are the implications? What are the outcomes if you go down path A, B, C, or D? It's like an instant EIR where everybody gets a chance to look at consequences.
Can you remind us what EIR stands for again?
Environmental Impact Report. So this is not a group I need to explain this slide to. Urban design connects all these dots. Every issue on this slide is impacted by the kinds of cities and communities we shape. The problem with this slide is that each one of those issues is a stovepipe of special interests and or a stovepipe of professions. And so everybody's dealing with these issues in isolation. You can be a housing advocate, you can be somebody dealing with water and ecology, you can be dealing with somebody cares about transportation. They're all sitting in silos. And the question is, how do you bring them together? Well, urban design inherently brings people together. We began to evolve a tool that allowed all those issues to be analyzed, all the metrics to be analyzed simultaneously after communities shape their own scenarios. And the differences are incredible. And very few people actually get the data, finally, of the implications of what they're talking about. The software is very complex and it's more enterprise level. Cities will use it, planning professionals will use it, and they can use it in community workshops and people can actually shape their own scenarios. It's 3 steps, very sophisticated database. The planning industry is behind the curve in terms of having access to the kind of information they need to make intelligent decisions. There's lots of it out there. It's not organized in a way that people can access it easily. So that's the first kind of layer of the software. The second one is building scenarios. It allows people to come together, and we've done huge workshops where people sit at tables and actually sketch on maps, and then we distill those into future scenarios. And by so doing, people get a sense of the whole challenge, not their stovepipe challenge, not their one issue, but having to solve all the issues simultaneously. So, you know, when people create a scenario, they're beginning to move out of their box and into a domain where they have to share ideas and they have to collaborate. And then finally, the analysis looks at all these impacts: public health, transportation, building energy, water, greenhouse gas. And by the way, this was all funded by the state of California under their program to limit greenhouse gas emissions through better community design. And then we explained to them there are all these co-benefits. When you solve for one, more often than not, you've solved for 10. But you have to have the metrics to demonstrate that. Local fiscal impacts. You know, a lot of cities going out of business in California because of the cost of maintaining sprawling infrastructure. Obviously, land consumption is something the enviros care about. And then there are all these new analytical engines, we call them, that sit on top of, once you have the data, once you have a scenario, you can analyze it from any perspective you want and get that data in very rapid time. We are now taking it from a regional scale, which is what it was created for at the state, to the city and to the project scale. So the people actually can meet in a neighborhood and say, this project, if it's shaped this way, it's going to have these impacts. If it's shaped that way, it's going to have those impacts. The real heart of it is really that it builds coalitions. I've seen coalitions emerge that never thought that they had common interests. It's only when they get the data, and I'll just show you quickly. This is state of California analysis, kind of smart growth versus dumb growth. Let's put it simply.
Anybody from Dumb Growth America here?
Yeah, there's a lot of it out there. Yeah. Well, if you're going to call some of it smart,
Yeah,
I mean, it's just like, actually, there's a lot of dumb growth right in that picture, and that's the alternative. Same population, different scenarios. Land consumption, vehicle miles traveled, auto cost, and you know, this auto fuel cost is a huge burden, and travel costs, huge burden on low-income households. Building energy, water use, California, a huge issue. Infrastructure costs, O&M costs, revenue, all the metrics, respiratory health, and now we're actually doing obesity and activity-based, all impacted by the shape we give our communities. That's actually a map of the amount that people walk across Southern California. In the red zones, they don't walk very much.
People walk in Southern California?
Look at the heart there, right in the middle of it, they do.
Better question, does it rain in Southern California? Does anybody get that joke?
Not these days. Have you read about the drought?
Oh, that's right.
My friend Trump came and told us we did not have a drought. The more fact-based. I guess this is my attempt to actually let facts help us on the way to wise decision-making, and perhaps more importantly, to coalition building in forms that we didn't think existed. That's all.
Well, thank you, Peter. And you know, part of the theory here is to go from kind of macro level ideas where we're leveraging technology and kind of move along the spectrum, where we're going to end up with Tyrone, who's going to do a very micro intervention and talk about the technology that he and his team has built. But first, we're going to go to Rick Usher and just talk about both your work with Google Fiber, but also other initiatives that the city of Kansas City has done.
Well, thank you. And at RUKCMO on Twitter.
Can everyone hear Rick, by the way?
No? Hello?
There.
There? Okay. So first of all, I said at RUKCMO. The game changer phrase, that definitely is what Google Fiber has been for Kansas City. I've been with city government for 31 years, and I've been involved in a lot of different projects. I have not been involved in a project that resulted in a billboard like this, sponsored by the Kauffman Foundation. This actually is a logo we put on coffee mugs that we took to our final negotiation with the Google team. So those are coffee mugs are collector's items now. But now, 5 years later, it's a project that is affecting everyone throughout our community. You hear people talking about Google Fiber in grocery stores. You hear, kids and parents, schools, government, technology. We're moving really quickly into digital inclusion, and in Kansas City, we have a coalition for digital inclusion that is really getting national recognition for the projects we have ongoing. So the thing that became evident in Google's deployment of the project and in the marketing of Fiberhood signups was the digital divide in Kansas City. And it's been unfortunate. In some cases, Google has been blamed for the digital divide. It's been around since the advent of the internet, and it's been around under the incumbent ISPs. So it has been, I think, inappropriate to blame Google for being the messenger. But what happened, and what's cool about being in Kansas City and the community that we have, is this is the first day of the signups, and you can see green indicates those fiber hoods that quickly reached the sign-up threshold where Google Fiber would say, we're going to build in your neighborhood. The yellow are those neighborhoods that were yet to reach that threshold. And is this a laser pointer? Okay, so this is Troost Avenue in Kansas City. And Troost Avenue is our historic economic, social, racial boundary line in Kansas City. And it's, you say to anyone in Kansas City, that's really the legacy we have. And we're doing lots to try to change that. But it really means that the economically distressed neighborhoods are east of Troost. And the interesting thing for me as local government to watch Google, who are tech dependent, you almost want to say tech savvy, but really they're tech dependent, like a lot of us today, meeting residents who had no need for technology, who it's not part of their lives. And the campaign was launched in a model where you had to have internet access to sign up, and you had to have a credit card to sign up, neither of which residents in these neighborhoods had. So Google really stepped up their game. They brought in, I don't know, 60 more people, a couple of ice cream trucks that drove through neighborhoods with Wi-Fi, and then Aaron Deacon, who leads the KC Digital Drive, launched a crowdfunding campaign called Paint the Town Green. That's where this came from. So by the last day, the majority of the neighborhoods in our economically distressed neighborhoods had reached their sign-up thresholds. And today, Google Fiber has been built out not only throughout Kansas City, Missouri's footprint and Kansas City, Kansas's footprint, but is now being constructed in 22 other suburban communities. So the gray on this map shows the areas that are your service area?
Either under construction
Under
or served now.
construction service areas. So really, Kansas City region is the really first gigabit region in the country. Bi-state region, I don't remember the numbers exactly. It's like the Kansas City Area Development Council will say 157 cities, 17 counties, 2 states, 1 Kansas City. And this is an effort, I think, that's uniting the city. So part of the success that brings to Kansas City, and this is a HUD initiative, Connect Home, to bring internet connectivity, computing devices, education opportunities to residents of housing authority-owned properties. We were fortunate, of the 28 communities across the country that are participating, to have Google Fiber already built out in our community. So Google, I don't know what I wrote in this, has pledged to connect 1,300 households in the housing authority. They've built out 6 computer labs that they call Google Fiber Lounges.
Access lounges.
Google Access Lounges, sorry. And those are places that are now programmed with classes that Google staff provide, that our local partners provide, Connecting for Good, Surplus Exchange. Others are providing classes in those facilities, and the residents are able to purchase refurbished computers through a program we created called Digital Upcycling, and through a Digital Scholars program where our Full Employment Council provides jobs at these partners in digital inclusion to refurbish computers, to provide the digital life skills training classes. And so it's been very successful in Kansas City. This leads us to then needing a digital inclusion, or what we will likely be calling a digital equity strategic plan. This is a graphic that we put together recently that really points out the 5 points in what we're terming the path from digital inclusion to economic mobility and entrepreneurship. And traditional digital inclusion efforts have really just kind of stopped at what's been called the 3-legged stool. Internet connectivity, a computer, typically a desktop computer, and some life skills training on how to use that. And then you're a consumer. You can go online and buy stuff. But we're defining this path so that as a learner, you're taking advantage of the thousands of online distance learning opportunities. As a digital citizen, you're engaging with friends and family, say through Facebook, with the business community through LinkedIn, with the city through tools that we have on My Sidewalk website we call KC Momentum. It's our opportunity for public engagement, and Twitter. We, in city government, I don't have the slide for this that was just presented at the ICMA conference, but we have one main City Hall Twitter account at KCMO, and then every city department has a Twitter account. Most of the mayor and council, the mayor and most of the council members have accounts, and we're very active in those. So really most of the communication I do with the startup community, the entrepreneurial community, and even like our civic hacker type community, I guess, we use Twitter. Then employee, work from home opportunities, distance working opportunities. And then finally entrepreneur, where you can go from being, at the beginning, a consumer of the internet to now you're a producer, you're a content provider, and you're creating a job for yourself, say as a home-based business, or you're creating jobs for others and becoming an entrepreneur. I wanted to run through one Twitter station that
And we
I
can't have you take up too much Rachel's shine. She's got a lot of good stuff to
All right, I'm
talk
going to run
about.
through this quickly, but this is just an example of how I've used Twitter and how we've used Twitter at City Hall to engage with the community. There was a building at 20th and Grand downtown, across from a popular bar that the owner had taken out permits to demolish, and he's demolishing this to expand a parking lot. And this is a Sunday afternoon. I'm at home, and okay, nobody's tagged me yet, but they've tagged the bar. What are you doing? Easy enough not to go there any longer. So they're like saying, well, you can do that. We're not going to go there anymore. Then the bar says, well, there's a hotel going in. They took our parking. We have 500 people capacity, only 30 parking spots. What they're not saying is catty corner across the street is a 300-space surface parking lot, the entire block, that is used for employee parking during the day and is chained off at nights. Nights and weekends, that parking is not available. Neighbors again saying, don't tear it down, way too much parking downtown already. Back to the need for parking. Then in the meantime, we were able to make contact with the bar owner and said, look, let us negotiate an agreement on that to share that parking, because you're going to spend a lot of money to tear that building down and build, what, 30 more spaces. So they did then tweet, we've been contacted to help with assurance. We'll keep everyone posted. Of course, everybody was happy with that. And then this tweet from the cashew, demolition on hold while other solutions are being pursued. Thank you from the neighborhood. And then a bravo on the Assurant shared parking solution. Thanks for your efforts. So this is a photograph, and you can see the 4-story dark brick building in the background is the cashew. Across the street from the north is their 30-space garage. And then the white 1-story building was the one that we're going to tear down. And then in the foreground is this 300-space parking lot. So we entered an agreement to operate that lot with the city parking vendor, parking operator, and they then didn't tear that building down. So for at least for surface parking. Is this yours?
That's me.
All right.
You ready?
Thank you.
All right, we go fast at fiber. So, by show of hands, who is not from around the metro? Okay, good. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about what the product is. I was asked to kind of bring you up to speed on where we are today in our offering, where we are geographically. But then I do want to go deeper on the digital inclusion work, which is where I spend a lot of my time. So fiber, if you're not familiar, is different than your traditional cable connectivity. It's made out of strands of glass about the size of a strand of hair, which allows information to travel as light much more quickly than what you can get with your traditional copper. Many providers use fiber in their networks, but up until recently it was not common to bring fiber all the way to the premises. That's where we came in with Google Fiber, and when we asked in 2010 if anybody wanted to work with us on a fiber to the home network, that's what we were offering. Of course, Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri selected to be our first cities, and here we are 5 years later. if you're not from around here, we get asked a lot, when are you coming to my city? And I will tell you, it's a real learning process for us, how we go about this today. There's an exploration phase. We do a preliminary design to see if it might be feasible for us to go ahead and deploy a network. We'll sit down and talk to your city officials and try to test if the relationship is going to be a productive one, and we've enjoyed a very productive relationship in Kansas City, Missouri. We'll get to work, sign-ups, and installations. Typically, if you look at the model where we are today in this metro, from the time that we sign an agreement to the time our first customers are served, roughly a year and a half is what it looked like in Kansas City. So as Rick mentioned, our footprint has expanded. This is what it looks like in Kansas City today. If you live here and you don't see your city on the list, please don't call your elected officials and yell at them. They did nothing wrong. We just aren't there yet. So if otherwise, you can certainly tell us you're interested. I can send that to you. I've got this email thing on the cybers. This is our national footprint. So those blue dots represent where we've got service live today. We are under construction. At the purple dots are a little bit deeper along. In fact, we already do have some customers live in Salt Lake City, I know. And then the gray dots represent cities that we've publicly said we're talking with them. We're in that exploratory phase with those city officials to figure out if we can go ahead and proceed with the build.
So I have a burning question.
Yeah.
Why Kansas City first?
Why Kansas City first?
Weren't you thinking that? Like, why Kansas City?
I'll tell you, there are a few key reasons. First, it's the infrastructure here. When the team came about to evaluate the cities, we had to look at the polls. We have very nice polls in Kansas City. And there's a good infrastructure at City Hall.
There's a joke in there somewhere.
They're lovely. They're lovely. The infrastructure at City Hall matters too, letting us know that we're going to be able to get permits in a reasonable time period. We're going to be able to do those permits electronically and not via fax, that they will have the staff that will come and be able to do their quality control work after our construction crews do what they need to do. So there was that piece. The second part is this community has very deep roots in entrepreneurship, innovation, education, healthcare, arts and culture, and so on. Google felt very comfortable saying, we are here to build a network, and it's up to all of you to figure out what to build to run on this, to make the gig matter. And the third piece would be the diversity of this community. We know in Kansas City that 25% of residents report that they don't have access to broadband in their homes. 17% report they don't use the internet at all. This was in a 2012 study we conducted. These are folks that aren't getting online at home, school, work, church, library. They're just left out. So for us, this is an opportunity to think about how do we not only push the web forward with speed, but how do we encourage new users to join us online. You can see here, this is the product offering today. When we launched, it was strictly residential, and we got lots of questions on that. Why wouldn't you start with business? Isn't that where all the money is? At the time, businesses could get gigabit service. Getting it at your home was nearly impossible. So this was a real way for us as Google to figure out how do we advance the web for all users without waiting for the government to do something about it, incumbents to do something about it. So today we do have a small business product. It is truly a small business product. We aren't at the point yet where we're serving big campuses or hospitals or anything. We've added some phone. People still like phone service. And then there's a broadband product that I'll talk about in a little bit too. This is a broadband product. So when we launched in 2012, we had our premium tiers of service, and then there was this option. You could pay $300 up front, or you pay $25 a month for a year. And it brought you very basic speeds of 5 meg down and 1 up for 7 years without a monthly bill. This was our approach to try to welcome new users to the web. Over the course of 7 years, it averaged out to about $4 a month. Very reasonable. It was a very popular product, but not necessarily among those communities most impacted by the digital divide. $300 is a lot of money for many families, and $25 a month is a lot of money for many families. And frankly, offering a product for 7 years to a community that tends to be highly transient didn't make a lot of sense. Landlords weren't going for it. So we had to take another approach at our digital inclusion offering. And what we have today is what we call broadband, so-called because the FCC changed their standard of what broadband speed should be last year to say 25 megabits per second should be the standard for broadband. What we've done, it looks very similar to the tools that Peter laid out earlier, but we've got FCC data, census data, and we can tell where current internet penetration is lowest, And in those areas, we make this product available to those addresses. It's $15 a month for a 25 meg service. There's no contract. There's no rental fees for your equipment. You don't have to fill out paperwork to prove that you're on any other type of government assistance program. If your address qualifies, you qualify, and you're on your way. If you move in 4 months, you can go ahead and disconnect your service. And finally, the digital inclusion piece is where I spend a lot of my time, and these are just some of the activities that we've been involved with in the community since 2012. The one that I would highlight, again with Rick, on that Connect Home project, at Google we call it Gigabit Communities, because we've committed to not only serve those cities that HUD selected, where we happen to have service, but we're also working with public housing authorities that weren't selected by HUD, but that we're still building out a network. So today we do have 5 Kansas City, Missouri properties that are served, but next Friday we launch our first KCK property, and KCK wasn't selected by HUD, but they're going to see 7 communities connected over there as well. And it is one of the most meaningful projects I've ever worked on, because we're bringing folks our top tier service. We're putting those access lounges in, so whether it's us or another partner, they have a pathway to education to be successful and safe online. And then through that fantastic partnership we have through Surplus Exchange, they're getting a device in their home for between $50 to $100, depending on if they want the desktop or laptop. So that part's pretty special to us. And I'm going to cut it off there, I think, because 5 minutes is 5 minutes. So,
Thank you.
okay.
Last but not least, Tyrone Poole.
All right, so my name is Tyrone Poole. The name of my company is noappfee.com. Before I get into it, I'm going to go give you a little bit of backstory about NoAppFee, because if I don't, you'll have a difficult time understanding what the product does. So the city of Portland actually was the first investor in the NoAppFee platform. And so noappfee.com is a great example of when cities work with entrepreneurs and startup companies. So originally, I'll tell you right now, I have a background in fire science. I got my associate's degree in fire science. I have no small business education, anything like that. I actually was injured in the academy and ended up being hospitalized for nearly 9 months, and then on crutches for a year after that. So during that time I was out of the hospital, I ended up being evicted from my apartment. My car was repossessed. I don't know if you read the bio, but I had nowhere to live after that. I ended up 3 months out of the shelter, exhausted all my friends and family, and mooched off every person I could until I ended up at the YWCA homeless shelter. The second day in the shelter, I got an award letter that paid rent anywhere I wanted to live in Portland. It paid, and it was up to like $1,200 bucks. 4 months later, I was still in the shelter with a letter that paid rent anywhere. So we blamed it on the fact there wasn't enough staff. There wasn't, we don't have enough resource to help the families get a place to live. But the numbers don't change for even programs who have huge resources. HUD, one of the deepest pockets there is when it comes to housing families. Portland vouchers, 40% failure rate. That's 40, that's almost half of the people who get a Section 8 voucher in Portland won't find a place to live. 45% in Seattle. It's 55% for VASH vouchers, which are homeless veterans. So I mean, it was a huge issue. So the city of Portland put on an event, and it was called the PDX Challenge, and they were looking for social changes from local startups. And I don't know why I got a wild hair to go apply for this, because when I remember buying my first polo shirt, I remember showing up at this event with jeans and a polo shirt. I paid $125 to be an applicant, which I thought was the biggest waste of money. And for that time, $125 was like $1 million for me. And I was a family advocate, so I actually worked at the YWCA now as a full-time employee. And when I got to the event, I remember people having matching T-shirts, teams of 5, cars wrapped in the parking lot, and with their logos and stuff. And I pitched my concept, and I said, right now I work at the YWCA, and there's 46 families in here that all have letters that they can house anywhere, but most of them I'll put back into the streets or live in their cars because this tool doesn't exist. And I said, if I could build a platform that could pull a person's background check and screen them against every single vacancy in the city at the exact same time, that I could instantly house every single voucher in a day. And so it asked me a lot of questions that I hadn't quite thought through all the way, but I did know that it was the issue was the matching problem. Every program spends so much time getting money and so that they can financially assist the family. But it stops there. There was no tool that once they have the money, it's like, okay, now how do we get them into a place? And every management company has their unique screening criteria. And so I know that a law passed to make it public, but even making the screening criteria public doesn't do very much for a family. So, I mean, if I said you can't have more than 5 derogatory accounts over $200 within the last 5 years, you can't have more than, you know, X amount of delinquencies, you know, the details that it goes into over the 18 different categories they check, you'd never be able to know if you exactly qualified or not. So what No App Fee did, we built this platform, and it pulls a renter's background check, and it screens them against every single vacancy in our database. We launched our pilot September 1st of last year, and we had 8 management companies and 80 vacancies on the website, and we had 1,700 families create an account in the first 30 days. We gave nothing but refunds back. We became a refund company. That's all it was. And we only had 114 families from programs. So we found that it wasn't even about the most vulnerable families. When anybody found out there was a platform that was literally the equivalent of manually going and applying in person to every single vacancy in the city, they put their money on the platform too. So needless to say, we had a successful product, and we opened a convertible note, and we raised every cent we asked for in 18 business days. So it was extremely exciting, that part. So this is the platform. When you just log on now, if you look at the different vacancies, a standard ILS, internet listing site, looks like rent.com, apartment guide, all those. The difference is all the pins right now are gray because you haven't created an account. But when you create an account and you get your background check pulled, the listings look like that. They tell you approved, denied, or conditions to every single property. And the site even goes further than that. If you're denied to a property, it'll actually tell you exactly what changes you need to make to qualify for that property in detail. So it'll say, right now, this is a person who fails for eviction, they're conditional on credit, but it says this listing allows a maximum of 0 current delinquencies. So this is a very strict property. You can't have any mispayments. And you have 1, so you're conditionally approved, and it'll let you know you must pay an additional rent. If you have derogatory accounts, it'll say this property has a maximum allowance of 5. You have 7. It shows you all 7 of your accounts, the dollar amount you owe, and the phone number to call to take care of it. So if I was a family advocate sitting across from a family, I would have them housed in the first day. So we had the city of Portland launched an RFP for it, and we now work with Portland, Georgia, and Seattle. So and we just relaunched this new platform September 1st. So that's what No App Fee does. I think one of the biggest benefits to this platform is that, one, I own it, so it's not a government tool. It's not owned by the government. I license it to them, which gives me the ability to make upgrades without going through the RFP process over and over again. And so every time a city gets on the platform, they have the ability to make it match their city. So I'll give you an example. Portland, we have got a crazy influx of new people. So, and housing has gotten crazy, but we had the Smart Cities Initiative. No App Fee was part of it. One of the big catalysts that helped it get to how far it got. And the Portland Bureau of Transportation said, you guys have this platform, Portland. We want to, they were challenging the fact that based on data that we had, that making housing affordable by subsidizing it was the entire concept of how valuable that was. So they added a tool to the site that allows it to see most economical. So I can actually take into consideration the transportation cost if you were to move somewhere. Mm-hmm. So we had a new property open up, and we ran a test on it, and it was called it was by Catholic Charities, and it was out in the middle of nowhere like most tax credit properties are. Right. And we did the math on it, and we said, yeah, the rent is $850 for a 2-bedroom, but if you calculate where their daycare is, where their job is, you'd find that the actual cost of this property is $1,900 a month. And the place that's across the street for them, that's $1,300, which is $500 more, is not only across the street, but it's actually more economical for them to live there. And so we decided, they wanted to guess that if we were to do that test on every resident in that property, that basically no one would have been most economical to live into this tax credit property, which would make it to where subsidies should go along with the person more than along with the property. So that was what Portland, so they're pushing that whole initiative. But this platform was able to be manipulated like that. In Georgia, same, they had another way that they wanted to add a tool to it, which allowed programs to be able to um, add different screening criteria for their program. So right now, if I'm housing authority and I go out to a property, I can say, I would like you to not check credit on my Section 8 voucher families. It makes no sense. Credit you use to determine if they're eligible to pay rent. The Section 8 voucher covers rent every single month, so can you please not deny people for credit? Or reentry programs say, hey, we're part of a program, please don't deny them for criminal history, or tools like that. And they can get the management company to say yes and agree to it, but then to have that enforced over 200 apartment complexes, multiple leasing agents, people who have no idea and then deny you have to try to go through this roundabout to prove how you guys have come to this agreement. It's complex. And so Georgia, who has this program called Open Doors, said, can you build on the platform a tool that allows it to where our team, because they have a team now of 200 employees that do this for these programs.
Wow.
And they can get them to say yes, but now they can pass it to no app fee. And so now we'll say, oh, this program has this MOU with this nonprofit, and we will attach this sub-screening criteria. So now if you create an account on us and you say, I have Section 8, the background will screen you against the lower criteria automatically. So there's no, you're approved, and you get to move in, and they paid the $135,000 it cost to build that.
I have a question, actually.
Yeah.
Has there ever been someone who was denied because they were a panelist and they went way over their time?
Oh, was I over? I was waiting for the numbers to come up. Yeah, I didn't see it. Right. So, sorry, I was watching for the numbers.
That was good.
But yes, so that is how the platform works. Sorry, I was waiting for the numbers. Go ahead.
My man. Thank you.
Yeah. I didn't see it.
So we're going to do a little interactive discussion, and then we're going to bring you guys in. You know, Tyrone talked a lot about how leveraging technology to help people find places to live, particularly folks who are the most challenged in the most challenging neighborhoods. Obviously, Rick talked about a number of initiatives, but even particularly Google Fiber and basically leveraging, you know, the fiber to actually include more people in just the world of the internet. Just hearing a study that said in 2012 there was anyone who didn't use the internet daily is just mind-boggling. And then obviously, you know, Peter has built using a technology to make sure that we're making better decisions based on real data. And actually, it's interesting to see that it's also a tool for collaboration, because it's, as you said, once people have data, sometimes you can get past political affiliations and demographic issues and the like, because they're focusing on the data and not their arguments that have nothing to do with the data. So one thing I wanted to ask though, all of those approaches leverage technology for good, but I wanted to ask you actually two questions. The first is, what's the limits of technology to solve some of these problems, particularly when we talk about equitable revitalization of cities and neighborhoods? And then secondly, and sort of related, is there any danger of over-relying on these technologies? And, you know, anybody can jump in.
Sure. Well, technology is a tool and not a problem solver. You have to have a community of problem solvers, in our case, within city government, and then within the various communities that we have, the tech community, the digital inclusion community. There's numbers I'm sure that you're dealing with as well, but you have to, I mean, you can see that data. I mean, technology, I guess, was used, actually, I guess people had to call those people to find out whether they were online. So it was a telephone survey to find that out anyway. So it's using the data effectively through implementing it then through programs. In Kansas City, we have a program called KC Stat, where city departments meet monthly with the mayor and city manager and go through performance measures. It's data brought forward. I was talking earlier with some folks about the time required to fix a leaking fire hydrant. You would call 311 and say, fire hydrant in my block leaks. And, you know, 10 years ago, we were like, cool, let me know when it's old painful, you know. So through KC Stat and through monitoring the time to repair fire hydrants, it went from 6 months average to 3 days.
Wow.
So using the data and the technology effectively produces, much better results.
The danger that I think about a lot is that we're solving for the digital divide as it looks today. So the three-legged stool that Rick mentioned, having access, a device, and the skills to be successful. But let's say we're 100% successful in solving that for today. There's going to be the next divide.
The next thing.
And that makes me concerned that we can't be complacent and pat ourselves on the back too much about what a great job we're doing and everyone's looking at our city as this model for good work. Yeah, we should be proud of what we've done, but there's always going to be something else to do. And it gives us some job security there, but unfortunately, and I don't know exactly what that is. I don't have the crystal ball to tell you what it is, but that's just the nature of technology.
So off of that, part of what we're dealing with is through the Connect Home program, one of our partners, Surplus Exchange, is selling refurbished laptops and desktops. Well, access to the internet via laptop or desktop is the digital divide today, because use of mobile devices for internet access surpassed desktops, laptops 3 years ago. So there's a 3-year gap then in what we're providing in those tools. So we are looking at, some of our partners are looking at now providing mobile devices.
I
See
think
any dangers out there, Tyron?
Yes, I would say dangers of technology. So
Besides you getting fabulously wealthy and then forgetting the people who knew you once when.
The dangers of technology. A lot of times, when you say use for bad, right now we use it for good, and it kind of makes you think, well, who would use them for bad? A lot of times, the technology is created for good, but then people find a way to manipulate it to use it for bad. Even the No Outfit platform, originally when we first launched, we had a tool on there that the point was to show you that, hey, your rent is so high priced. So we wanted to say, hey, out of the families on this website, you only 5% qualify for your listing. You should do something about that. So drop your criteria. But what ended up happening is people also use it the other way, and they say, wow, 98% of people qualify for my property. I'm way too low. And if I push it up all the way to here, I still can get more renters. And so it can be used, the opposite way. It's showing you that, 50 people qualify for your property in this area. And you're like, okay, well, 50 people are looking for this, and you drop it to, raise it to the point where only 10 people are qualified looking is the equivalent. So you do have to, even just the fact that we have a screening criteria, that we have you fill out all these values. If there were things that you didn't screen for before, now you just added pieces to your screening criteria that you didn't even know that was out there. So it can be dangerously used, and you can hurt people unintentionally by trying to solve the problem.
Let me pick up on your use of the word screening, and it makes me think, and you probably have heard how Airbnb has had some issues when it comes to race. People have heard about Airbnb in the sense of they've had some issues that a lot of the people who were renting out their homes would screen out people based on race. And as a matter of fact, I have a friend of mine, it's a couple, and it's a black guy who sort of looks like me, brown skin, and his wife is a black woman. She's very fair-skinned, so many people would mistake her for white. And so they were doing a family trip to LA where they were going to do an Airbnb, a sort of super fancy luxury house. And he applied, and they denied him. And he said, man, I don't understand. This house is like $5,000 a week. There's no credit issue. What's the deal? And so then she immediately applied right after, and they accepted. And so I'm thinking, and Peter, I'll ask you to sort of chime in on this. When you have a software that could make good decisions based on data to do good, what happens if people have racial bias in their minds and want to leverage it? Are there things we can do to build some defense into our technology so that people can't use it for bad?
Well, specifically in regards to the technology we were developing, I think the biggest problem is participation. Who's willing to come and use it? How do you make it accessible? I mean, what's beautiful about this is really accessible. and what you're doing in terms of, broadening accessibility. I think it's, who can show up. I mean, what did you call her? The Gloria? what was it?
Gloria Fishes.
Yeah, I mean, who gets to be there? And it turns out that actually showing up for city council is not as broad as it should be by any stretch of the imagination. There's a lot of people that just don't have the time, the knowledge, the wherewithal, daycare, what have you. And with our technology, it's very sophisticated stuff. So it's really professionals use it.
Right.
Our hope is that the professionals use it on behalf of community accessibility. So community workshops, but there's still the issue of who shows up to a community workshop.
Right.
So I think that's the biggest danger in all this, on the one hand. On the other hand, the domain, technology like this information technology does broaden the base. It may not be perfect, but it becomes more accessible. So for example, we used it, there's a website called youchoosebayarea.org. And basically it allows anybody to go online and create a scenario for the Bay Area growth, where housing
You're talking
is.
about California?
Yeah, San Francisco Bay Area, we call it.
And in Maryland, there's people that call there's an area of the Bay Area.
Oh, they're trying to steal our thing, huh? Jeez. Anyway, the point is that anybody can go online and build a scenario for their whole region and look at the consequences. And then, there's a little piece at the end of where they can go to the next meeting so that they get sucked into the community process. But I think that's the biggest vulnerability.
We have, for us, in mentioned vulnerability, when we're going into a housing authority community and we've built fiber to every unit, it's completely free. All you got to do is switch on your Wi-Fi, you create an account, you're good to go.
Wow.
We see a lot of folks who have real trust issues. First, you're Google, you're going to watch everything I do on the internet. You're working with the housing authority, you're going to tell the housing authority, I don't care how many cat videos you watch, just don't run a server farm out of our residential network. Or you're partnered with the housing authority, with the government, so you're going to tell them everything I do. And then the third piece is that these are the most vulnerable communities, and nothing is ever free. Why are you doing this? It makes no sense that you would give this to us for free.
Right.
Then what we see happen too is we share our list of, here for example are the 12 communities we've identified in Kansas City that we're going to bring this free service to at some point by the end of next summer. Other providers will go door to door, get folks locked into a contract and say, do you really believe Google Fiber is going to bring you free internet? There's a catch, come on. So these folks will sign up for it, and then we come on property and they've got to pay a bill to somebody for a while.
Wow, wow. I don't want this conversation to only focus about race. How many people here have been to a meeting that had more than 50% millennials in it that was a community meeting? Anybody? Very, very few. We see 2 hands in the audience of more than 2 people. So what do you think we can do? So in some ways, it's funny because we talk about millennials and they're digital natives, and there's no technology divide when it comes to them. But when it comes to the work that we're doing in urban neighborhoods, the millennials are the ones who sort of spend the least time actually being a part of the engagement, which really is supposed to lead to the decisions on what's going to happen next. How can we leverage or deal with that?
I think a big part of it is that so many community meetings are reactionary. In other words, there's a proposal, people are showing up to review it and speak out on behalf of their concern. And younger people actually are more, they like interactive, creative, maybe it's a bad stereotype, but what we have, we did call this thing SimCity for real. SimCity is a game. People love to do it just because it's intriguing and it's complex and there are all these layers to it. And the reality is SimCity just scratches the surface of what the design problem is.
Right.
So actually making it accessible, not as a game, but as a design problem that people can engage with, I think is another way of drawing people to the table. It's a different kind of people, different kind of people enjoy different kinds of activities, but it's certainly one that, once again, broadens the base from a reactionary modality, which is what we seem to always have in the public, in the political sphere.
Any other thoughts on younger folks getting involved?
Another reason that they're not at the table is because their businesses work in real time, and you have to be able to make decisions to pivot to grow in real time. And if you work with those municipalities who work in a completely different concept of time,
Right.
then you got a business. So
Right.
today, for you to even include them in the conversation, or for those two to work together, most investors won't even invest in a company who has a B2G business model. So you have to be careful, because it's like, oh, 2 years from now, you'll actually have that RFP close and actually get that contract.
You can't guarantee anything.
Exactly. So it's and that's if that person stays in office, and that's a whole bunch of different things coming out. So I think that's one of the biggest reasons I would tell you why most of the people I know have brilliant concepts and ideas that would solve a lot of civic needs, just don't have the funding or the ability to stay alive long enough to have that.
Did you have something to add, Rick?
Yeah. I was going to tell Peter, one of my followers thinks you're brilliant.
Awesome. Real-time social media interaction here.
Well, so to back up what Tyrone was saying, this program that he participated in Portland, we have a similar program in Kansas City we call Innovation Partnerships. And it's our way of dealing, because government, like you come to us and try to sell your company, we're like, oh, no, we don't, no unsolicited proposals.
Right.
Right.
You're not welcome here. So we created this front door that we call Innovation Partnerships. And a great example of a success with that is a company called RFP 365. They launched in Startup Village, which is an area of town that Google helped light up. And they completely digitized the city's RFP processes. And our purchasing director took them under his wing, and we worked with them, I think, in a 6-month pilot, and now we've been contracting with them for the last, I think, 3 years. And what happens, and I'm sure what's happened with you, is now you have Portland, RFP has 365 has Kansas City, Missouri as a satisfied customer to go out and push that company. So they've grown, they've hired 8 more employees, and now in our innovation partnership, we've got 7 companies that are in a 12-week program right now.
Gotcha. Let me, I want to bridge some of the discussion earlier. We're most of you here with the discussion about using the word DNA in describing kind of the feel of a city. I wanted to sort of bring that discussion forward. And my question for you guys, so the mayors and some of the J.C. Nichols Award panelists talked about the idea that cities have a DNA. And one of the things that Mayor Sly James said is that, well, cities have a DNA. I'm not sure if you can change them, but they do need to evolve. And so I have 2 questions for you guys. The first question is, who owns the change of the DNA, and who owns the definition of what the current DNA is? And then how can we use technology to make sure that there's a diversity of voices who are saying what the DNA is and what it should be? And if people want to join in on this by asking questions, please do as well.
Well, I think that I've been a long-time advocate of the scenario process. It's a strategy that says there is no correct answer. There are many answers, and you want to lay them all out and look at them. Well, scenarios are an invitation for people to describe their version of the DNA, right? And everybody comes with their own preference list, their own deep concerns.
Right.
And actually, it's really healthy for a community to see how broad these different interpretations can be. And you uncover that with scenarios. Then the next step, at least in our process, is always, okay, now we've got all these scenarios. Let's see how they work. Let's see what the implications of them are. And what always seems to emerge is that there are coalitions that you didn't expect that actually are lurking beneath the surface. Coalitions that the actual members who create the scenarios didn't even recognize. So the most typical separation, and actually has come to quite strident political conflict, is social advocacy advocates versus environmentalists. And environmentalists get put in the bucket of you just care about open space, you don't care about affordability and racism and all these other things, and they seem to travel in separate circles. And yet, when you look at the scenarios and you look at the results, actually they have common cause. And on surfing, bringing that into focus, very important act.
So the process illuminates the commonalities that would otherwise.
But in terms of what is the DNA, it's in the eye of the beholder. And what shapes the future of the DNA? I believe it's coalitions. I mean, we live in a political domain where you don't go anywhere unless you aggregate interest groups. And I think part of the stalemate right now is that we have these two vast interest groups that are seeing less and less commonality, less and less overlap, and they just so we need to bust through it somehow and get to a point where unusual coalitions can reemerge, or a new set of coalitions. The old ones aren't working, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
And let me get Tyrone in here, because I'm thinking of Portland as a city that has a specific DNA, or at least a self-described DNA, and then I can get Rick in, because Kansas City, I think, has one as well. But there's an influx of newcomers, right? Sort of high-paid technology workers, San Francisco expats, and I know there's some discussion of whether the DNA of Portland is changing, and who gets to say what that change should be. So what do you think?
So the mayor actually did his final State of the City speech, and I think he mentioned no app fee as being part of the DNA of the city, like maybe 5 times in his speech.
Nice.
So
you were like, thank you.
Right. I actually showed up late, so I didn't get to sit at the table next to him. I was like way in the back somewhere. So they kept showing the light on the table. I'm like, I'm not there, but it's okay. But so I think that there's a difference between what a city wants their DNA to look like and then what it actually looks like. And so when Portland talks, they talk very vividly about what they want their city to turn out like. But then when you look at the reality of what's happening, is so many Californians, so many Seattle families moving to Portland, and they just announced a couple months ago that there are no more, that there's a complete gentrification of Portland, and there are no communities left that the median household income would qualify for African American families. So there's none left. So cover of the newspaper, everything. So that's the true DNA of the city right now.
Wow.
But that's not what that's not what they want it to look like. So I think if you can make sure that there's a division between what we're striving for and what reality is, so you can get the true DNA. But.
So Rachel and Rick, how does Kansas City think about this? Because one of the things I think about mid-tier cities is the aspirations tend to be a lot of the positive things that 24-hour cities have, but the aspirations sort of leave out some of the downsides that tend to come with it. And some of that has to do with potentially a loss of the sort of DNA of the city and what the city thinks about itself. So what do you guys think?
I think first, Kansas City, we like external validation, and we like people telling us, you're really good at this. And every time there's a list that we're on from some magazine, everybody goes wild because somebody told us that we're great, or Google Fiber picked us. Yay. So that's to me part of our DNA. But I would say I've lived here my entire life. I grew up primarily in a very urban neighborhood that lower income families today is one of the most culturally diverse parts of Kansas City. Then I lived in a suburban area, and today I live in Brookside, which is like city, but like leave it to Beaver City neighborhood. So my experience with the Kansas City and the DNA shifts depending almost on your geography too, and what you're exposed to and what resources you have. So while the city might be known for barbecue, jazz, and technology and friendly people, your experience in Northeast or north of the river or Johnson County, Brookside, your DNA is going to be a little bit different based on that environment, in my opinion.
I completely agree. You can almost tell what neighborhood someone is from after you talk.
By the socks they wear?
5 or 10 minutes. Well, I don't know about that. I think that in Kansas City, and like I said, I've been here 31 years, that what we're experiencing today is really a reflection of the political leadership that we have. And Google Fiber coming in as a game changer there. And there's been a lot of business community leadership. And I know, that like Jonathan, we had the Downtown Council at the Civic Council. This is a long haul to get to where we are today. Really, the success of downtown goes back 20, 25 years to build the downtown that people want to live in now, that people want to work in now. And we're seeing businesses relocate, still of course, obviously incentives are a key, but relocating because it's where their employees want to work, and it's where we've had companies, in the suburbs that they'll interview candidates and they'll entertain them downtown, and then they interview them, and it goes from the vibrancy of the city during the entertainment piece to lawnmowers,
Right.
at your interview.
Nothing wrong with lawnmowers.
And they're like, well, that's a whole other conversation. But so the key is really sustaining this going forward. I think the mayor made that point. How do we bring these programs into, the DNA of City Hall?
Right.
Continue
Right.
thinking innovatively to continue the program.
Well, I see a question. So, anybody else who wants to get to the microphone, but Ellen, you're the first one up, so.
My question, and I'm not really sure if anyone has the answer.
Microphone.
I have a question about the whole notion of connected communities.
Can you turn on the mic? I think it's probably not on. Maybe that was it.
I think,
technology.
How's that?
Oh, better. There you go.
Yeah, that's
By the way, it was off the whole last time.
So my question
It's off
is,
again.
and I'm not sure that it's off.
It went
Yeah, it
off.
did.
There was a green light when it was on, and then it turned off. There it goes.
It's on. I'll just shout. I don't know that anyone really has an answer on this, because I know it's been a discussion from the days the internet was first begun, but was whether or not people begin to substitute their social life online for their engagement with their actual physical immediate community. And so whether when Google comes to town, or when a city completely just makes public Wi-Fi for a whole city, are there studies that really show increases in community engagement? Or, I think all of us who have sort of grown up, as we've grown up, as the internet has grown up, have also seen the complete polarization of everybody going to self-select the facts they want to believe in, the news sources they want to choose from, the self-selection of kind of echo chamber communities, instead of really using it to just get all this great data and information and diversity.
So you're
So,
saying it's actually going in the opposite direction.
Well, they're both happening, yeah, and I don't know which one's winning. I don't know where it's really going, but it seems to me there's evidence of both. And is there anything we can do to really? Nobody kind of owns it, nobody controls it entirely. But my question is, is this technology really uniting us or dividing us?
Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that it's obvious that if you use Twitter or Facebook as your conduit to information, that you're going to think completely differently about situations than someone who doesn't, who actually maybe uses newspapers or actual confirmed information. And so, yes, you will be on completely different worlds. But I don't think I couldn't tell you anything about the direction or anything.
I think just stories that I've heard from residents at the Housing Authority on their experiences, because they weren't disconnected, or they weren't as connected, say, as they are today with Google Fiber. A woman whose son was in the military and hadn't seen him, and one of the Housing Authority staff connected with her son on Skype while they were in some kind of a meeting. And then he walked up to her and said, "When was the last time you saw your son?" She said, "It's been too long." He shows her son on Skype live, and he says, "Hi, Mom." She fell to her knees. So the connectivity offered can be life-changing. And for these residents, it really has been. We've talked to a mother who had two kids in high school. They're having their best year ever. They're telling her, "This is my best year in high school ever," because they're able to do their homework at home now. And they're doing it with a gigabit connection. So
Tamara Butler, who didn't have a job, she's on disability, single mother, and used her new connection within a month. She found a job, found a car to get to her job, figured out a childcare option, all of this by learning how to use the web. So we have so many great stories as one-offs that we know that it's making a difference in people's lives in a positive way. But to your point, yes, it's absolutely an opportunity to divide communities too. I tell myself all the time to never read the comments anymore in certain publications online. But it really depends on your perspective. Frankly, I thought the internet was a fluke when it came out while I was in college. I had a group assignment and we made one guy learn to use the internet because that's how the teacher would communicate with us, and the rest of us thought it was the dumbest thing ever.
Was that Sergey Brin?
No, he did not go to Northeast Missouri State. So.
Anything to add to that, Peter?
I don't know. I mean, I just don't. That is the question of the time. Obviously, it's going to do both. It's going to basically amplify both trends, and they're both going to interact in a really complicated and sometimes tragic manner.
Well, I'll throw out one comment on this, and maybe people in the audience can weigh in too, is I think we're part of the problem in the sense of we're building these tools, and maybe no app fee is a alternative version of this. But as you said, most of the tools that could have convening power and collaboratory power are built with folks like us. And frankly, as Mayor Sly James said earlier, we're in our own echo chamber in these meetings. So we're building a number of tools that could be used to actually do the positive things you're talking about, but we're not building them and bringing them to and training the folks who would need them the most. I mean, it's a great example to actually be in public housing, but there's 12 other levels of that where literally folks need to go to the people and say, hey, one, let's tell you that this tool actually exists. Two, you can use it. It's okay to use it. And three, let me teach you, let me train the trainer. So now it's not just the one woman who learned how to use it and then she has these positive benefits. Yeah. She can go out and then train 10 other people. You train the 19-year-old, he trains grandmama, the dad, the sister, the cousin, the friend from another neighborhood. I mean, but I think it's imperative on us to think that way and say, well, do we have a Spanish translator at this meeting? Because if someone is English as a second language, they can't come to this meeting and follow all the great things we're talking about. On and on and on. So I think some of it is imperative on us to take these tools out to the people.
I think that's what's nice about digital inclusion is that 5 years ago, when I would talk about this work with other potential funders, they would say, why should I care if poor people can't get on Facebook? Someone actually said that to me. Now we understand how important it is. You can get more people at the table, and we actually have best practices that we can share with one another. So like train the trainer models, and interestingly, intergenerational models are popular with young people working with older folks. But what we've seen is that people like to learn from people who are like them, because there is a vulnerability that you put yourself out there to say, I don't know something. And you want to learn from someone who you might be a little bit more comfortable with. And we have a really cool senior computer users group here in Kansas City. I love going to their classes. There's this lady, guys are talking in her class, and she yells at them. And these are guys that are her age, and they're getting along online. But a teenager wouldn't have said, hey, collect yourself, pay attention.
Right.
She does.
Right.
Social acceptability is a huge component, and it's because of things like Facebook. But any solution that you put out, it has to be socially acceptable, or people won't use it as an alternative solution. I'll give you a really quick example with the Housing Authority. We sat with them and we said, we were working on that transportation piece, and they said, oh, we already have a bus that goes to the different apartment complexes and pick them up and take them to the grocery store. So because it was this huge thing about how poorly food stamps are being used. People were going to spend $7 at 7-Eleven for a gallon of milk instead of going to spend $1.99 at Fred Meyer's and why, right? That was the big thing, and we found that it was transportation. So they said, that can't be it, because we already solved that problem, and we have a bus go to all our communities and take them to the grocery store. But and I was like, nobody is gonna get on the
I'm on
poor
the poor
people
bus.
Right.
I'm not on the poor bus. I'm not
Exactly.
getting on the poor bus.
I'm not getting on it. I
Absolutely
will
not.
walk and spend $10 on a gallon of milk
Right.
before I go get on the poor bus to go to Safeway. So then we start working on an Uber system that maybe instead of gas rewards, you can get Uber rewards from Fred Meyer. So trying to, tools like that. But it was so that's another big stigma that comes along when the government tries to solve problems. They just try to solve it for this thing, and just the fact that no AFI, we don't advertise no AFI as being a low income tool. Instead, we have our marketing. No AFI is market based, but then we give our technology to cities to solve their problems. So we built a separate site, housingoregon.org, that is for all of the programs, all of the things. Because if you don't do that, then people are like, oh, no AFI is a great tool, but it's only for poor people. Yeah. So I'm not poor. Why would I use this tool to find a place? So just got to make sure that social acceptability has to be in every single time something is used, or it just dies.
Some of it too, I think, is, and if there's a question, please come to the mic. Is really who are we building these tools for? I mean, let's actually go back to the public realm discussion earlier. When you think about a lot of parks are built for architects and designed for architects, not for people who use parks.
And a lot of buildings too.
And a lot of buildings. So you get these tools that could be the great conveners. They could have this collaborative effect, but they're built by people like us for problems that we're trying to solve, which really are our problems, not the problems of the neighborhoods that we're trying to include. So, but I see a new question.
Mr. Poole and Mr. Calthorpe, you've given us a view of tools today that have helped residential tenants and communities kind of underwrite their decisions. And in our world of many people in this room, what is missing in that sort of total cost of occupy that so often gets missed in our decision making is for developers and tenants of office buildings. Comparing the cost of parking and transportation and that total cost to occupy, and then to get the financial world to underwrite that. You've done that. You've gone a long way in your world. How can you see using your tools in a way that, as efficiently as yours does, help the people who finance our projects and our tenants actually use that information and it's underwritable to the financiers?
Boy. That's a good question. I don't have a quick answer to that. The underwriting is, at least in the tool that we're putting forward at this point, is a large-scale cost, collective cost, rather than individual. We can pinpoint the median household cost for this kind of community development versus that. Very easy to do. Better buildings, reduces utilities, closer proximity, more transit, more walking, reduces transportation costs, building size and envelope. All these things we can get, and the infrastructure costs for less sprawling versus more compact. And these numbers are very important, but they are for the median. They're not for the individual. That's a different kind of software. But I think that they all become complementary. I mean, it's completely possible then to go from that point, saying, okay, we're making a community-wide decision about, are we going to build this project, or are we going to put in this kind of infrastructure, and here are the community-wide impacts to, okay, I live in this community, and it's made the decision to do X, Y, and Z. How can I benefit from it? Seems to me that there's software for all that. And the beauty of all this stuff is that it's going to make people more intelligent, whether it's in making large-scale community decisions or making personal decisions. The more information people have, the better decisions they're going to make.
Did you have anything to add to that, Tyrone?
No.
I'll throw out one thought.
That's not my space. I don't know
What?
I said that's not my space.
I'll throw out one thought in that context, which is I think there's a network effect that can be helpful. I think the world of finance, unless you can say no app fee has this number of users in this geography that relates to this building, they'll never believe it. So the more you can get people on Peter's platform, on Tyrone's platform, using Google Fiverr, and you have that aggregate data, then you can go to the bank or the source of equity and say, hey, this is not just illustrative of these 5 people, this is illustrative of thousands of people in different geographies, so you can believe these numbers and therefore underwrite the things I'm telling you. So some of it is, can you aggregate it and get the usage up enough that they believe it and don't think it's just a, you're just selling them this thing, but it actually doesn't reflect a larger base. So
I'll give you an example. We used the tool in Honolulu recently because they had voted in a metro line, and it's a perfect city for metro. It's linear and high density, and completely congested because it only has one highway. Only one highway fits. But a bunch of environmentalists, believe it or not, had come up against building the metro line because it would be growth inducing. They don't like growth. Well, we know what that's a code word. We know what that's a code word for.
Yeah.
But when we were able
What
to...
is that a code word for?
It's for we don't want poor people coming, being able to live here. And so we did the analysis and we showed the land conservation, which really shamed the environmental groups, into silence politically. They just could not come out anymore. But we also showed the household economic impacts in all the affordability and the reduction in infrastructure costs. And oh, by the way, we were actually able to show that this $5 billion piece of infrastructure, which everybody said, we can't afford this, this is, way beyond our debt service means, was only half of what it would cost to handle the same trips by road in terms of expanding the highway system. So when all the data was on the table, I think the better decision was made. And, I think on behalf of people who may not have actually been engaged in the analysis, but I think benefited nonetheless.
Right. Well, let me just give you guys each sort of 40 seconds to wrap up, and let's give our audience a tangible piece of advice. If each of you can give them one piece of advice on how to leverage technology to better the revitalization of communities and fix some of the inequities that everyone talks about, what would that be? We can just start with you, Tom.
I would say inclusion. Make sure that the people at the table are people who are experiencing the problem. So don't just try to fix the problem for other people. 'Cause if they're not there, then you're probably going to get a poor turnout, a poor solution.
Thanks for that.
And I completely agree with that one because you have to be connected to the community. It's kind of that first question on is technology the solution. You have to interact with the public. So get out there, meet people who aren't just like you, find out their needs, and maybe technology isn't the solution. Maybe just going to meetings and talking with people is the solution.
Okay. Rachel, get Google cannot be the final. No.
No. My first thought was right along what you said, Tyrone. Secondly, I think part of the reason why Kansas City has done so well post Google Fiber and how they've leveraged it so far in the short window of time was that they've been really hands-on and thoughtful and proactive about what does this mean for small business and what red tape can I clear at City Hall? What does this mean in terms of how you do build-outs even, and how can you make build more efficient? Because we aren't the last person that's going to do something with infrastructure here. So with that, I think Kansas City has been very successful as opposed to communities who just kind of sit back and say, let's see what this Google Fiber thing means to us. So for that, I think the Kansas City approach of being thoughtful and proactive is
Be intentional.
Awesome. Peter?
I think it's about getting more Glorias involved. I know Gloria. Boy, when you showed that picture, and it wasn't just her, but there's a gang in every city that's at every
Anybody
city
in the
council.
audience know a Gloria, by the way?
I mean, everybody knows Gloria. And the idea that you can get more people to show up because they have easier access to information and feel like the process is open to their ideas, the better off we're going to be.
Awesome. Well, on that note, if we could all thank the panel.